Hey guys, Charity here. I want to talk to you about fall garden planting in the South. I am in Zone 9 in South Louisiana, and I'm going to be sharing with you what I'm doing as well as a couple things that are possible. So let's jump right in. I'm going to share some super important tips and reminders for you at the end once I give you an overview. So be sure that you stay tuned for that, and I'll let you know exactly what I'm doing in my own garden as well. The first thing that you are really going to need to know is when your first frost date is. My first frost date is November 26th, according to the Farmer's Almanac. You can just open up whatever web browser that you have on your phone and type in first frost put in your zip code, the city that you live in. It'll populate a date. It'll tell you when that is. Then you can also go on your web browser and say how many days until November 26th, which for me is 131. We still have 131 days until frost here, which is incredible. There are really two options for fall gardening in South Louisiana where I am. Because we still have 131 days, really you could grow anything at all. You could still do a do-over of all of your summer stuff. We could still do, I've got notes here, cucumber, eggplant, tomatoes, peppers, squash, zucchini, okra, beans, and like crowder peas, things like that. All of those things still have plenty of time to grow. Sweet potatoes we planted like at the beginning of this month. Be a rebel, throw some in if you wanted to give it a shot. You could get a harvest from all of those things if you planted them right now. The trade-off will be if you want to plant some summer things or some fall things come September. So you really got to decide what you want to plant. I personally am going to be planting a lot of cucumbers this upcoming month because I planted my cucumbers really late, like in April. I got a decent amount that my kiddos ate fresh the entire time. I put up 0 pickles. I didn't ferment any cucumbers at all. I really want some more cucumbers. I'm gonna be redoing some tomatoes because, my sun golds are looking rough. We're just gonna start fresh with those. There are some distinct differences with things that you plant for the summer versus things that you plant for the fall. For example, if I put a tomato transplant or I plant one tomato seed, that will grow into a tomato transplant that will give me hundreds of tomatoes potentially, depending on what variety that you planted. If I plant a broccoli seed, I am getting a broccoli and potentially some side shoots. If I plant a turnip seed, I am getting one turnip. So it is a little bit different in that you're not going to get as much fruit from an individual seed. You also really want to succession plant in the fall because of that. Because if I plant tomatoes in the spring, I'm going to be getting tomatoes for a long time. If I plant turnips, when I harvest all of those, there's no more coming. So you really want to be succession sowing and knowing what your goals are. If your goal is to plant a ton of radishes and ferment all of those radishes all at one time and it's going to last you the entire winter, you could probably plant an entire bed of radishes and get all the radishes that you need at one time, and that might last you for a little while. You could also like roast some of them, all the things. But if you want to continually be harvesting radishes to have some fresh in your salads, to roast some, to ferment them, you're really going to want to succession plant. Whereas the tomato and the cucumber that you plant in the spring, they're going to keep giving you a harvest for a decent amount of time. Also, the fall garden really enjoys cool weather. Like, it appreciates it just like we do, and therefore it is not as difficult to grow. It loves the cool weather. It is so excited about it, and therefore it's a lot more manageable. Like this spring, my garden is looking wild. It's a hot mess right now. The weeds are crazy, the plants are crazy, it's very unruly, and the fall garden is just not like that. The fall garden is turnips and radishes and beets and carrots and collards and broccoli and garlic and onions wherever I put them, and they don't sprawl out everywhere and they don't get wild and crazy, and it's actually a nice break from that in the summer. So it's very manageable. It really can be like a plan it, set it and forget it kind of thing, and you will get something with a lot less weeds. albeit. So I'm going to cover what we can do upcoming for August and September. We've got a lot of different options. A lot of people are wondering, when do I start my seeds? I personally am going to be starting seeds the last week of the month. I ordered my seeds on Sunday, which was the 15th, I believe the 15th of July. So all of those seeds should be in within the next 2 weeks. And then on Sunday, July 30th, we're planning to get some seeds transplanted or seeds started. That will give me about 4 to 6 weeks for those little seeds to become transplants and then to be able to plant them out in my garden. My goal is to be starting planting the last week of August. I want to plant the last week of August through mid-September, and by that point have the entire garden planted. That's going to give me a 3-week period of different things coming in, which is going to stagger my harvest. And then as I'm harvesting, I'm going to be continually planting more things. It's also going to make it a lot more manageable because I have a lot of growing spaces, and if I tried to get everything in at one time, it just wouldn't happen. I've really got to get a lot of things weeded. I've got to amend some of my beds that did not get planted and just were overtaken by weeds. And so yeah, my goal is going to be to start seeds for transplants July 30th. That would be for things like, let's see, artichokes, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, celery, collard greens, kale, kohlrabi, maybe some arugula. Those kind of things are the things that I'm going to be starting seeds for. So I'm going to put those seeds in little cups or in a little seed tray that is going to grow over about a 3 to 4 week time period. And then between the end of August and mid-September, I'm going to be transplanting that in the garden. There are things that we can still plant in August if you're about it. Those things would be, you could still plant cantaloupes, you could still do lima beans, pole beans, bush beans. You could actually plant fall corn. A lot of people say not to plant corn in the fall, just to do it in the spring, but you could plant sweet corn in the fall. You really could. You definitely want to get it in before September 1st, but you could try it if you were feeling so inclined. We can do cucumbers, more okra, pumpkins. Know that if you plant your pumpkins now, you're going to get Thanksgiving pumpkins and not Halloween pumpkins. Just be mindful of that. You can do more summer squash, tomato transplants. Do it. It's so worth it. Peppers, and you could give it a shot with your sweet potatoes. With your peppers, if you have peppers in your garden now from summer, please do not tear them out. Whenever we start hitting August, September, we're going to start getting some cooler nights and mornings, and your pepper plants are going to become fantastic. You're going to go from getting a pepper that was this big to getting a pepper that's like this big. It's going to look better. It's just everything. It's going to taste better. Everything about it is better. Peppers really love the fall, and they can go all the way up to frost in your garden with no problem at all. For fall planting, these are the things that I'm going to be planting out at the end of August or beginning of September. So the things that I mentioned to plant in August would be for a second round of summer things or fall plantings of beans or corn. Those are going to be the things that are for that. Things that I'm going to plant in September, got my notes here, would be my Brussels sprouts, beets, cabbage, carrots, cauliflower, celery. I'm doing mustard greens. You could do collard greens. You could plant kale. I'm doing kohlrabi, lettuce. I'm doing snap peas. You could put English peas in, radishes, spinach. I really love sorrel. That would be my favorite for spinach. You could do shallots. I'm doing rutabagas, turnips, cilantro, arugula, and artichoke. Those are all going to be things that I'm looking to get in September. I'm going to make a little list of those things so you can screenshot that over here. With your broccoli, you kind of have to be a little bit careful because broccoli really does not do very well in the heat. And so if it starts to flower and you start seeing flowers from your broccoli bolting, it kind of makes it inedible and really not enjoyable. So I'm going to be kind of planting my broccoli towards the middle end of September, just to be sure that I don't run into that unless we end up having a really, really cool spring. Other things that I'm going to be doing a little bit later that people always ask about is garlic. I'm going to plant in November, and in December I'm going to do my onions, probably end of November into December. So garlic and onions will be Thanksgiving, Christmas time, around all of that. Swiss chard could go in September, and I really want to get a lot of herbs in. Herbs that you could grow in the fall would be parsley, cilantro, lemon balm, sage, mints, lavender. I can't grow lavender to save my life, but hopefully you can. Thyme. Dill is another great herb to plant in the fall. There are other different medicinal things that you can do. I'm actually going to be trying to plant mamu beans and see if they make it through the fall. That's a native medicinal to our area. Good morning, y'all. Editing Charity here. I just realized I did not at all address flowers, and so I wanted to remind you, given that we have so many days to harvest, you can literally replant any flowers. Zinnias, cosmos, Mexican sunflowers, marigolds, whatever makes your heart happy, you can totally do that. But here are some cold tolerant varieties of flowers that really would do great. If you plant them in the fall, kind of get them established before frost, they'll really, really do well. But here's a little list of those. Sweet alyssum, snapdragons, violas and pansies, calendula, and black-eyed Susans. A lot of people don't really think about black-eyed Susans, but they've gone through like 26 degrees for me and been great. I think black-eyed Susans, I read, can get to like -30. Like they just do great. So don't forget to plant your flowers also. Let's get back to it. One thing to remember is that in the fall and the winter, the sun is not nearly as potent, I guess. I don't think that's the right word. It's not quite as powerful. The UV rays are not nearly as powerful, which we're kind of getting a little bit of a break from that. So with the days to harvest on the back of those seed packs, remember that it might take a little bit longer than you anticipate because the sun is not at its peak state. It might take just a little bit longer. However, we have 131 days. Like, we got time. We got plenty of time. And actually a lot of things really do like frost. Your broccolis and kale and some of the greens, like some of those things actually taste better with like a 34, 32 degree day, just depending on, you know, where you're growing. I really, really, really want you to plant a fall garden, because if you've given up on your summer garden, now is the time. The weather's getting cooler. It's going to be so much more manageable. It tastes delicious. Everything from the fall garden is really, really good. And if you don't think you like it fresh, ferment it or roast it, and you got something to try. There's a lot of variety. And even if you just put some things in for yourself to have salad, like have a salad once a week. Go out and pick your own salad. If you've got some carrots growing, you could pick those. You could potentially have carrots and tomatoes at the same time if you're growing a cooler variety. I'm actually growing the Glacier tomato and the Subarctic Plenty tomato, which can handle a little bit of cool weather. So those tomatoes, I'm hoping if we have a late frost, and that's gonna take me through that time. But speaking of frost, your frost date, your estimated frost date, which mine being November 26th, is kind of a guesstimation, right? So you could be 2 weeks earlier on that number. You could be later on that number. We had a year we didn't have a frost until January, and it was glorious. I had so much harvest from that garden with a lot less work of covering. And you might also want to know, am I willing to cover? That might be a really good question to ask yourself. If it gets down to the wire, if I plant a summer planting and I still want to do some fall stuff, am I going to be willing to cover it and take care of it? The last thing that I want to remind you is that if you are planning to plant a second round of summer things and then put in some fall things, don't forget that you're not just looking at the days to harvest on those summer things. So you're going to plant those plants. Something that says it's a 70-day variety will start producing from 70 days that that seed is in the ground. And once that seed is in the ground, it's going to be producing, and it might produce for 3 weeks, or it might produce for a month, or for 6 weeks. And you don't want to get all the way to harvest time and then not allow it to continue to produce to harvest. So be sure that if you're planting something for summer right now that's not beans, that maybe you think about planting your garlic or your onions in that place later in November and December. I am going to be replanting a couple things, like I told you, my sun golds, some cucumbers, some different things like that. The main places that I'm really gonna focus on replanting is gonna be my trellises, because there aren't really a ton of things that you grow on trellises in the fall. I really like sugar snap peas, and I really wanna get my blue butterfly peas in the ground this year so that they're ready in the spring. But even that's a sacrifice, because it's going to be taking up a trellis when I wanna plant it in the spring. So I am going to take anywhere that I am planting something else for a second round of summer, and those are gonna be my beds for my onions and my garlic. The other areas that are currently open or currently have something in it are going to be where I plant my fall plants. I've been picking purple whole peas for the last week or so. Once you start to see a flower on those bean plants, usually the next week the beans are ready. And I've already been picking for 2 weeks, so I'm kind of guaranteed that within the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, all of those bean plants are gonna be spent. And I'm just gonna cut all that down, let it kind of be as mulch, and then I'll cover and I'll add something in there for fall. A lot of things are going to get planted in September, and if I have open spaces right now that are not filled, I am probably going to be weed eating if there's weeds, and then mulching and covering that up and waiting, because it is extremely hot. I want to be on top of harvesting and preserving the things that I've had growing this summer. That way I have less work whenever it comes time to plant. Don't come to plant and have a ton of weeds in your garden and be really overwhelmed and think, oh, I can't do this. This is going to be too much. So make that decision. Do you want to plant your second round of summer? Do you want to just ride out this next month and relax and clean up the garden to be prepared for the fall? Are you going to buy transplants, or are you going to start them yourself? If you're starting them yourself and you're in South Louisiana, this is the time to get them started within the next week, 2 weeks, end of July at least. Start getting those seeds started, get them ready so you can transplant them at the end of August or the middle of September. And mulch, mulch, mulch. Get the weeds out, mulch it. If it's got to rest for a month, so be it. But I really, really encourage you, plant something for fall. You will not regret it. If you're local, on Sunday, July 23rd, we have a seed swap from 5 to 8 p.m. at Head Kicks. You can look up that address, and I will have plenty of fall seeds to share with you. Let's grow, friends.